Hello, and welcome to another guide. A lot of people like the fog guide that I made, so I wanted to make another one for pool. I think pool has a very high skill cap as well as fog, and I wanted to show some advanced tips to complement basically other guides that already exist. And this is intended to help even for people that are already in the top 10 or something like that. But it's also, like I said, for the fog one, it's also like for, I would say probably anyone who wants to really learn this and improve on pool in general can learn from these tips. Hopefully that's what I hope anyways. I'm going to show 3-2. I have 3-2, 3-4, and 3-6 prepared as the levels to show. So let's get started. Preview is going to matter very little. I'm going to explain later how preview can change things, but it's very minor thing. Obviously in pool we are going to have 3 phases. Obviously first flag, second flag, third flag. It's going to change a bit how we want to approach each one, how exactly what we want to obtain from each one. This is already a guy in the sunflower row, so I can't really show the most common start. I will say that here, for example, you can do this. You can also plant the sunflower on this square if you want. Both options have their merits. The advantage of putting the sunflower in the same row when that situation happens is that you can actually if the second wave spawns on the second row, for example, in this case it would have threatened my sunflower. In the other case it would not, because you have all the sunflowers in the same row at that point. So you can actually do this play, and if the guy actually spawned on my sunflower row, I would have actually squashed the guy anyways. I would not be preparing the squash for the next wave. And if I put my sunflower in the same row, and the disadvantage of that is that later on in the level that sunflower is going to be a bit more vulnerable, especially like in waves 7, 8, 9, etc. If you get like a fast cone head, that sunflower is basically dead. So one thing you can do, and I'm not going to do it in this level, but it's possible to do. One thing I didn't mention is for first flag in pool, there's like 50 different ways to play that are going to work fine. There is not one single way that you can approach things. One thing you can do in this case is pre-plant a squash. I'm not going to pre-plant a squash. I'm actually going to save it so I can use it on cone heads. The advantage of pre-planting squash is that you can run the cooldown earlier, so you can actually use more squashes in the first flag. The disadvantage is that if you pre-plant a squash, it can actually hit a normal zombie, which is not ideal. So if you want to play safer, I would say keep the squash, and when you see a cone head, you can use it, and you don't risk pre-planting it and it getting wasted. But if you want to play more aggressively and you want to use more squashes overall, you can pre-plant it and hope that it hits a cone head anyways, in which case it's beneficial. Like in this case, if I pre-planted, I would have gotten away with it. The mine always goes in the same row as the row you just killed, because it's the most likely row for the mine to be safe, basically. This guy, I'm going to let the mower kill him. I'm pre-planting a repeater here because I don't have anything that I need to do. And this bottom row is very likely to be the next one that's going to get spammed. Just because nobody went here since like wave 2 or 3. Okay, this wave, this is actually important. I say that there are many ways to play pool, but this is one wave where I think the solution is unique. You should plant a repeater. Using a squash here is a mistake because, first of all, you already have one repeater attacking this row, so a second repeater is going to... With 2 repeaters, you're going to get the rule very decently quickly. This is wave 7 already, so this actually went quite fast. All the instas got good value in this case. The mower got value as well. By using a squash here, you are risking having a wave 8 that's like, for example, let's say you get 2 guys in the pool, cone and normal zombie, you have basically nothing to deal with it. And so by saving the squash, you can actually deal with waves like that. If this cone spawned in the pool, so if it was like cone in the pool and normal zombie here, I would actually squash the cone head, but because I already have a repeater attacking this row. I don't need to use the squash right now, and it's better to just plant a second repeater. And it doesn't matter that the repeater is attacking the cone. If these two guys were switched, the play is the same one. You just want to have 2 repeaters attacking the 2 guys. That's already going to be enough to get the rule. One thing that you should never do, or almost never do in the first flag, you should not use jumpers. At least maybe on wave 9 you can. Sometimes I will explain wave 9 in a bit, but waves 1 through 8, almost 98% of the time don't use a jumper because it's too much of an investment of sun, and you want the repeater instead. So in waves like this, yes, jumper is going to get a faster rule immediately, but you're going to need the setup for later. So let's continue. See, this rule is basically already done at this point. Okay, so this rule ended up being easy, this wave, so... But if the cone head was here, I would actually need to use... again, if those 2 guys were switched, I would have used a repeater on the cone head, not the squash. Because, like, again, the normal zombie is already dead, so the repeater only has to get a few shots in to get the rule. Using an instant kill is kind of a waste. Okay, and wave 9. This wave 9 is actually interesting, but I want to mention wave 9s in general. For wave 9s, ideally you don't want to use... The priority that you want to use is you want to... Let's put it like this. Best possible wave 9 is if it's like two zombies, conehead and normal, and one goes to a mine, the other one you squash. That's like the best possible thing you can get, obviously. If that doesn't happen, the second best thing is you squash one guy, you use a squash, and then you're waiting on a repeater to kill a normal zombie, which is kind of what's going to happen here. Third best option is you use a cherry. The cherry is obviously going to be faster, but the problem with the cherry is you usually want the cherry for wave 10, because wave 10 is going to get very dense, and you are going to want to defend that with the cherry, because it's going to get more value in that way. But if you have, let's say the wave 9 was a cone top row and the normal zombie in row 3, because I have nothing attacking those 2 rows, that would be a good cherry, for example. And then, of course, you could also have like somebody going to your mine, and then you don't have squash, so you chomper the last guy. That's also the one situation where you can't use a chomper in the first flag. That's like the only situation. Those are kind of the combinations of wave 9s that you can get. And basically, I said it in order of what is preferable versus what is not ideal. Using the chomper is always like the last thing. It's always like the last resource in the first flag. Even on wave 9. So here this guy, because he's unattended, I could actually save the squash and repeater. I could also repeater the guy. I think it's kind of equivalent in this case, because this wave 9 is actually a bit weird. But because this guy is still partially body blocked, I mean, it's basically the same thing. I'm going to repeater the guy in the pool, and I'm going to save the squash because I don't really need it. All 3 normal zombies are going to die at the same time anyways. So this is not the fastest wave 9, but I'm going to have a lot of repeaters, so this is actually quite decent, even though it's not the fastest time per se. Sunflowers. Oh, by the way, important thing, the potato mine, you should delay it a little bit. For the huge waves specifically, the way I like to do it is when I get the text, like this red text, wait about 0.5 seconds, I would say, or between 0.5 seconds and 1 second, something like that. And because by delaying the mine, you're going to make it so the first zombie that spawns is going to eat it without dying, without the mine arming, and that's going to give enough time for another zombie that's behind to group up, and then the mine is going to arm and it's going to kill both. If you plant it too early, it's only going to kill the first one. It's of course a bit risky, because if you get like a really fast guy, flag zombie always kills it, that one doesn't matter, but if you get a really fast zombie, it might kill it. So you don't want to delay it too much, but like I said, 0.5 seconds usually works. And yeah, one thing I was saying is sunflowers, you usually plant between 16 and 20, something around that. I'm actually going to save the mine in this case, because I have so many repeaters that I don't need the mine in this case. Okay, buckets are always an insta, either a squash or a chomper. So whatever you can use. And this wave, I don't need to use a chomper here, because I have a guy that's already dying to a mine and 2 guys that are already getting shot immediately. So a chopper here would speed up by like 2 seconds. Maybe not 2 seconds, actually a bit more. Like 3 point something seconds, I don't know, I think, on average. But having the extra repeater is more important. One thing that I think it's maybe the most important thing about this guide, about pool in general, I like to call it the golden rule, or that's kind of a cliche name, but whatever. Is you want to use, well, one of the most important things about pool is when do you want to use the repeater, like I just did, or when you want to use a chomper, because usually you can't do both because they're too expensive, and so you have to decide between having more preparation, having more firepower, or having more, or using an instant kill to get the wave faster. And an easy rule that should work almost all the time, and it's going to make the levels very consistent, or as consistent as possible, because this is PvC, the most you can do, basically. A very consistent rule is going to be, if the wave has 1 cone or less, or so 0 cones or 1 cone, you always use a repeater. And if the wave has 2 cones or 3 or more, basically, you use a chomper, or you use an instant kill, whatever you have available. If you have a squash, obviously that's better. In some situations, I will comment on that later. But basically, 2 cones or more, you use an insta, and 1 cone or less, you use a repeater. That rule is going to, if you apply it, it's going to carry your pool levels a lot. It's probably the most important thing that I want to say about this guide. The one situation where the rule doesn't apply is right now, when I already have all 6 of my repeaters. I just planted one, and from now on, that rule is not going to be that effective, because in this case, I just had a first flag that allowed me to plant a lot of firepower. But sometimes you will have a faster first flag with less repeaters, and in those situations, especially, following the rule is super important. Now that I have all my repeaters, I can just use instas. Putting 2 repeaters in one lane, you can do it if the wave is like all normal zombies, but usually it's not very important in 2 flag levels. 3 flag levels are a different story, but 2 flag levels, you don't want to use 2 repeaters in the same row. Usually it's more important to just use the chompers, even in waves that are maybe not as good for chomper. If you already have all your repeaters, you can do that. But when you don't have all the repeaters, you should follow you should always, or almost always, follow the golden rule. It's going to perfectly balance the preparation that you need for the later waves of the level with how much you can go faster by using chompers on waves. Okay, these waves are easy because it's just bucket heads. I need to chomper anyways. Even if I had less repeaters, I would still use the chomper in those situations. Okay, squash, because it's cheaper than chomper, obviously. So here I have so much sun, and I'm going to use an extra repeater, because I have nothing else to do, basically. Cherry is a bit late at this point to use. Yeah, also another important thing, I don't really have this problem right now, but if I had squash for this wave, for example, I would not use squash. And the reason is this wave that's incoming is wave 18, I think. Hopefully I didn't miscount, that would be embarrassing. Is it 18? Yeah, I think it's 18. This is wave 18, and for waves 16, you really want to have the squash for wave 19. And not only that, you want to have the squash for wave 19 immediately. So if you, on wave 16, 17, 18, basically, you don't want to use the squash, it's important to save the squash for wave 19. And the reason why that's important is because, first of all, you're probably going to need the squash on wave 19. And the reason why you want to use it immediately is because that squash, the cooldown on the squash, is often the last thing you use on the final wave of the level. So the earlier you use it on wave 19, the fastest you're going to finish the level, basically. That's one super important tip that a lot of people don't actually do. And if you look at maybe your own runs or other people's runs, a lot of people end up losing time because they have to wait on a squash on the final wave. So it's very important to have the squash as soon as possible for wave 19, which in this case I might not even get in time. I might have to wait a little bit, but usually you're supposed to... I use my squash on wave 15, which is usually like the border of when you can use it or not. But yeah, I'm going to wait slightly. I also could have not used it in this case because all the zombies are normal zombies, but I'm going to hit this one, which I think is the last one to die. So one slight problem here is that I don't have the mine immediately. The last few waves went a lot faster than I thought, so it messed up both my squash timing and my mine timing. I was expecting, I was not expecting the waves to activate that quickly, but usually again if you had the mine immediately, which I should have had, I guess. You should follow the advice of, again, you see the text and 0.5 seconds or something like that, you plant the mine, because it's going to group up zombies more often. In this level in particular, because it has the footballer, you might argue that you should plant it earlier so that the footballer doesn't kill the mine. That is another way you can play it. It depends. And a big factor in pool in general are the final waves. Let's see the ambush first. So one thing with the final waves in these levels is they are very important to get correctly. There's not really a good way to just give a general tip for final waves. You kind of just have to play final waves and kind of understand what you have to do. But some things I can say is guys like this Conehead, who are very far forward and they are not a normal zombie, so this repeater is not going to kill it in time. You are going to need a chomper for them, or a kelp, obviously, if you have it. I don't have kelp in this level, obviously, but for other levels. Guys that spawn in column 8 like this can be included in a cherry, especially with this lily pad that I pre-planted. Sorry for, I'm stopping. Like one of the reasons for the lily pad pre-plant like this is to be able to stall this buckethead, which is what I'm going to do here with a sunflower or something. And I can actually include it in the cherry. Whereas this guy who's further forward, I'm just going to use a chomper on him. Then zombies like this footballer or the Zomboni in 3.6, it's the same thing. You have to either chomper them immediately, or if you can, which is what I'm going to do here, I'm going to try to include him in a cherry. If this footballer was in a side row, like row 1 or 6, I would probably use the chomper, and after that chomper the guy in the pool because he's less of a priority. And yeah, after that you want to make sure that you use the squash on the row that's like the most crowded, the row that has like the most amount of zombies, even if it's not necessarily high HP zombies, obviously, to make use of the squash ability to hit more than one zombie. Whereas the chompers, obviously, you want to focus them on buckets, cone heads, etc. That's like the general thing. The final waves are more a thing that you have to do based on execution, and it's not as mechanical as maybe the rest of pool. But okay, you can kind of follow this advice as much as you can. So this, I think I'm going to use a cherry here. Okay, I used it too late. Okay, that's a mistake. But okay, so I kind of wanted to. I didn't mean to click on the seed. It's unfortunate. So I think the time should be something like this. What I wanted to do there, I was nice preview. What I wanted to do when I chomper the cone in the pool, I kind of, because I was distracted talking, I kind of didn't realize something obvious, that I didn't have the lily pad to use in column 8. But what I wanted to do was I was trying to use the cherry on land and group everything up. And yeah, again, because I was talking, I kind of got distracted a bit. But I was supposed to use that cherry a bit earlier in column 8, and that would catch basically everything except for maybe the normal zombie that was up top. Yeah, 3-2 final waves I think are the most difficult final waves, just because of the whole variety of zombies that you have. And there's also just I think it might even cheat the waypoints, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But yeah, final waves, there's not really like a tip for final waves. It's more like something that you have to do a lot of final waves and practice it. Like I said, focus on ambushes that are far forward and footballers or zombonis, or try to include them in the cherry. That's like the best thing. And use the squash on crowds. Aside from that, there's not a lot. Aside from that, it's more execution. You just have to realize where you need to do stuff. Okay, so let's go to the second level. I didn't see the preview, which I wanted to look at to do something. But doesn't matter. So with the rake, the first flag is going, the early game is going to play different. In this case, I have a rake and a full 8 seed slot build. So what we do with the rake is the mine goes pre-planted immediately because the zombie is going to the rake. And if this guy, let's say this guy spawns in anywhere but this row, you pre-plant a squash immediately, and then you can do squash, and then mine and kelp, or you can also do some combination of that. And meanwhile you just keep planting sunflowers. You kind of just play these 4 plants intertwined somehow. There's the exact order is not that relevant. Some people do the squash after 4 sunflowers. I do it after 5. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. When you get a guy on the mine, you want to hold onto the squash in case you might get more guys on these top 2 rows, which didn't happen. I could pre-plant, but if I pre-plant, I might get another guy top row. That's why I didn't pre-plant. I just waited to see where the guys spawn. One thing I didn't mention is why I'm using the... I think this is also kind of... It's not necessarily mandatory that you do this, but it's something that I recommend doing. Why I'm doing the sunflower layout like this. I also did it on the previous level. And I recommend putting the repeaters in column 3. Mainly because it's just much safer to have the repeaters back here, because there are... First of all, if you're not very comfortable with pool in general, like if you're still learning even more basics about pool and stuff, and you might have situations where your repeaters are getting eaten by fast cone heads or something, just having the repeaters further back is going to give you a lot more safety and prevent the levels from collapsing. It's much more important to, like, you might lose the sunflower in column 5, but you're not going to lose the repeater, which is obviously a much bigger factor. And having the repeaters 2 columns back, it's not really going to affect your final time almost at all. There's in case you haven't watched it, there's a good video that Bulba made explaining why, like the math behind why the further back repeaters end up not mattering too much. Is like a 1 second difference or maybe 2 second difference or something like that. It's like very minor thing, and the extra safety that you get from it is a lot more important. So that's why I recommend this. And also in the Volter levels, which I'm going to play one later, it's going to be very important to have the repeaters here for something that hopefully I'm going to get to show when I get there. Okay, so I didn't actually use the squash in this level. Like I said, you don't need to pre-plant squashes, and in this case, it was a good thing that I didn't, because there was nowhere that I could get value from it. This wave is a bit interesting. I'm going to wait on the kelp, I think. I could also not use the kelp. Okay, this wave is a good example. I'm going to use a cherry here, and the reason why this is a cherry is because I have nothing on... I have no firepower on these 2 rows. So I guess the alternative to a cherry would be a squash chomper, but that's more expensive, and using a chomper is not going to be worthwhile at this stage of the level. If it was really the last resource, I would use it, but because I can just use a cherry, it's going to be better this way. It's going to be an instant wave, and this is actually a super fast first flag. It's like a 2-1x is kind of insane, but obviously the lack of repeaters, I only have 2 compared to the last level where I had 4. This is going to be something that... This is the ideal first flag. You want this, you don't want the other one is also okay, the one I got previously where I had 4 repeaters and like a 240 start or something. This is the ideal start. But this is also the hardest one to play. I was kind of hoping I would get one like this. And this is the one where it's very important to follow the golden rule in the second flag, because it's going to prevent you from getting overrun a lot. If you use too many chompers, this is how it could get bad. I also have pool cleaners, which I don't want. Actually, that's kind of something that I overlooked. I mean, obviously you want pool cleaners, I just don't want it for the purposes of the guide. That's what I mean when I say I don't want pool cleaners. So I'm going to use a kelp here to get rid of this flag zombie. Normally I would use a mower. Actually, you can actually use a mower on the flag zombie. I'm only not doing it because I kind of fucked up and I was not supposed to. I didn't want to use pool cleaners, so I'm just. But if you if you have, if you just want to do it in your runs, I think in this situation the best play, especially because the flag zombie is fast, you can just let it go to the mower, and that way you don't need to spend sun or an instant kill in getting rid of him. So that's what I would recommend for that particular wave. Also for this wave, because these two guys are very close together, you might want to use the regular mower even on these two guys. It depends on how their next few waves play out, but one thing that a lot of people don't realize is pull mowers can actually save you from situations like this. When you have a really fast first flag with not enough repeaters, and you can just ignore the pull lanes because you don't have any sunflowers there. Like, yeah, you lose 50 coins, but who cares, right? Nobody cares. So yeah, Zamboni gets chompered, obviously. If you have a squash, you use the squash, but I don't. And again, this wave, golden rule, 4 normal zombies, 0 cones, repeater. Very important to follow. It's actually 5 normals because of the bobsled, but same thing. It's very important to follow the golden rule, especially when you get a really fast first flag like this. Again, another wave. No reason to do anything. I have a squash. I could use a squash. It's actually maybe a decent play, but you don't need it because the rule is already activated by this point. So the squash would only save like a very tiny amount of time. I'm going to use it here because I already have all my repeaters, so now it's different. I don't need another slow wave with firepower. I can already do something. And at this point, we start playing more aggressively. I think Kelp here. Kelp is another thing that, just like Squash, ideally you want the Kelp to be available for wave 19. And same as Squash, ideally you want the Kelp to be used immediately, although Squash is more important to follow that rule, I would say. But Kelp, you can also play it like that. You can also make sure that your Squash and your Kelp is going to be available for wave 19. So yeah, this wave I am not going to use a Kelp. Squash, I mean, no matter what spawns, basically. I want to hit this guy. Had to wait a bit there. Repeater because I have a lot of sun, otherwise I would not plant that. Squash immediately, first thing that I use, and Kelp also very quickly. And this guy is going to be the last one to die, the top row. So again, I'm going to delay the mine. It's not necessary to delay the mine. Because it's 3-6 and there's some bonus spawns, you could plant it immediately. It's a bit safer. I'm going to do the more aggressive strat of trying to kill the entire row with the mine by delaying it. Let's see if it works. Or I also have this chomper, so the Zamboni is not going to be that big of a deal if it goes there. And again, I see the Zamboni. It's either I chomper him immediately or I include him in the cherry, depending on what happens. Probably include him in the cherry. Oh, I missed one guy. Yeah, so that's slightly inconvenient. Not too bad, to be honest. And again, see the importance of... Well, in this case, it didn't actually matter too much, but the importance of having the squash and the kelp immediately. If this one normal zombie wasn't there, that squash and kelp would have been the limiting factor of the level. So using the squash and kelp immediately on wave 19 would save you time. Like, if you use it at the end, I would have lost like 3-4 seconds, something like that, just from not using the squash and kelp immediately. And if I didn't use the squash and kelp on wave 19, I also would have lost a bit of time because I needed at least one of them and possibly both to save. I think I needed one to save like 2 seconds and no, sorry, I needed both to save like 2 seconds and at least one to save like 7.5 from another chomper. So it's very important to manage the instance well on those two waves. Because obviously they are the two most important waves of the level, as usual, the wave 19 and 20. Let's do one more level and let's do a 3 flag level this time, and I'm going to play it with 7 slots because just kind of as a bonus. Basically, a lot of people kind of struggle with 3-4 with 7 slots. So to be honest, the extra slot on 3-4, the extra slot on 3-4 is not that big of a deal. It's obviously, it's kind of easy for me to say that, but it really isn't that big of a deal because the thing with the potato mine on this level, first of all, the build that you have to do is this one. There are like some ideas of you can use mine instead of kelp or mine instead of cherry bomb, but to be honest, in my opinion, they are both nonsense because it's using the potato mine like this without having the other insta to back it up in the second flag or third flag is going to result in very inconsistent times. The mine can save you in the first flag, and then in the other flags you're not going to do anything with it, and you might need to deal with like snorkels or huge masses of normal zombies that maybe if you skip the cherry bomb you're fucked. So it's always better to just drop the mine if you're wondering. It's going to lead to safer levels in general. The main thing that the mine does is give you like a really high peak if you get very lucky with mine value. It can also save you in the first flag if you get a lot of normal zombies or something like that. Like if you're getting spammed really badly on the sunflower rolls, but that's something that doesn't happen very often. So it's mostly the advantage comes from having a high peak, and it's better to have the consistency with kelp. So yeah, the way when you don't have mine, you can actually do this style of playing where in the previous level I said that pre-planting squash was not necessary, but when you don't have mine, you can actually do more squash pre-planting because it's basically going to fill the role of the mine for just an extra 25 sun really. And you can do it like this where you put all your sunflowers in one row and you squash the wave 3. Not wave 3. You squash, I don't know what I'm saying. You squash after 4 sunflowers or 5 sunflowers maybe, depending on how you want to play it. This wave, I think I'm going to pre-plant here because this is just a normal zombie. So I can actually use a repeater to kill him in a bit. I also could have squashed this guy. I think both plays are reasonable. This is obviously a bit slower right now. Maybe squashing this guy was better, but the thing is, if I squash this guy and I get a bolter, I'm fucked. So that's why I chose not to do it. Okay, this wave is free, so I'm just going to... I'm just not going to do anything here. I'm just going to keep planting sun. One thing that changes in 3 flag levels about the the sunflower layout, you want to start putting your sunflowers... You want to put some sunflowers in the pool because you need more space on land on these levels. Especially when you have bolters, but also on 3-7, for example, that doesn't have bolters. You want more space on land because you're going to need to plant more... you're going to need an extra column of repeaters. So the additional sunflowers that I said in 3-2 that you place between 16 and 20, but the extra sunflowers in this level should go in the pool to save some space in land. In the other levels, we put them on land because it's cheaper, but here we need the space. So that's why. And this is a good way to show. Actually, this is wave 9. But if this wasn't wave 9, I could let this Volter go like this and not do anything. And the Volter would eventually die to the repeater. And this is the main advantage of the column 3 repeaters, is that a single Volter doesn't do anything. You don't have to react at all. Sometimes it will kill a sunflower. It's inconsistent if it kills the sunflower or not, but it's much less of a deal than with the normal column 5 strat where you have to do something or otherwise the bolter jumps jumps over your repeater and is actually going to threaten everything. So here I'm going to squash it because it's wave 9. But if it wasn't wave 9, I don't have to do anything. And yeah, basically at this point, the lack of mine is no longer a factor, kind of. It's all about having it's all about playing the rest of the level normally. So squash wave 10, even though there's a bucket, I could have gotten away with chompering, but there's no disadvantage about using the cherry there. That wave, by the way, I kind of broke the golden rule there, and the reason why I did it, the one situation where you can break the golden rule is when you have a guy that's, especially if it's a conehead, body blocked, which was the case there. There was someone in front. I don't remember who. I think it was a normal zombie. So killing the guy the cone head that's body blocked, even though it was a single cone head wave, is actually a very reasonable play. Because something that can happen there is I kill 2 normal zombies, but because the cone head is body blocked, if I deal no damage to the cone head, the 50% rule is not guaranteed. So in this case, breaking the rule is not a problem. I also have a lot of preparation anyways, so it's not even that bad to break the rule in this case. Like, I already have a repeater in every row. So in this situation, it's acceptable. Like, the best example of using the golden rule was in 3-6 for sure. Even though I got all normal zombie waves, which I think most people would use a repeater anyways. Even if I got cones, I would have been able to handle that. So you have to trust me on that one. Yeah, and at this point, 3 flag levels, you want to start planting a second column of repeaters. Which on the 2 flag levels I said it was not a good play. On the 3 flag levels it becomes a good play because you're going to need that in the 3rd flag of the level. Sure. I chose to chomper the snorkel there, even though... Oh wait, that's a bad play actually, this is wave 9. What I should have done was just use a cherry. That was just a cherry. That was a really good cherry, but I miscounted. That should have been an immediate cherry. On 3 flag levels, wave 19, you want to use the cherry immediately. And if you have the squash, you can also use the squash if you need more than that. But in this case, cherry would have been immediately the wave 19, obviously. I just wasn't counting correctly. For some reason, I thought the cone head on the bottom was a normal zombie, so I thought the waypoints were like not enough for wave 19. It was wave 19. So yeah, wave 20, always use a cherry or a squash. If you have the cherry, use the cherry, otherwise use the squash. Because of the zombie density, you want to use something that can kill multiple zombies. To prevent something like this where a bucket head might be body blocked, in this case it's fine, but you want to reduce all the chances that the bucket head is going to be a problem. We keep planting a second column of repeaters in every row if possible. You don't always have to complete the setup, but if you can complete the setup, it's going to be fine. This is awkward. And kelp in these levels, use it mostly as a defense against snorkels. You don't need it for anything else. Because the kelp takes so long, like the zombies take so long to get into the pool that you really don't need the kelp to activate the rules that much. So it's better to just use it as a defense against snorkel zombies. A lot of people end up struggling with snorkels just because they don't do that. They don't use the kelps enough, in my opinion. So this is wave 29, so same thing, I'm going to use the squash the very first thing on wave 29 so that it will be available on wave 20. I actually wanted to pre-plant the chomper, but this guy's in the way. And yeah, final wave here, same thing. Be careful with the buckets and stuff. Okay, this is looking like a cherry bomb, possibly. Maybe not, maybe this is a cherry bomb. This is going to be a squash. Shit. I was supposed to squash that. I kind of messed it up. This was a bad level. I think it was mostly played correctly except for wave 19. I made a huge fuck up there. Everything else was kind of normal, but the RNG was not amazing, to be honest. That should conclude the guide, basically. I think things that I haven't explained about the golden rule are I basically covered coneheads and basic zombies. The way you other zombies interact with the rule about when to chomper and when to repeater. Basically, bucket heads always chomper in every single situation. Always is or any instant kill, obviously. You always want to insta kill them. Some bunnies, same thing. Then Volters, almost always you want to use like a repeater to kill them. And if it's a 3, well, obviously it's always a 3 flag level. Often when you get a Volter, you can just use the second repeater on that row. That's very often a play that you can make. Or if you have the column 3 repeaters, you can just let the Volter go. It's going to die after jumping. after jumping, it's going to die here in column 4. Then dolphins, you pretty much always want to kill with in 3-8. You always want to kill the dolphins quickly, either with the kelp or if you can snipe them with the chomper in column 9, that would be nice. Or if you have to wait for him to jump over, you can use the squash, but that's a bit slower. But you almost always want to insta-kill the snorkel. The dolphin, I mean. In 3-9, you might be able to, if it's like a wave with a dolphin and a bucket, you can just kill the bucket. But usually dolphin, you want to kill him immediately. And then snorkel is a bit weird because snorkel has the same health as a basic zombie, but because the snorkel is a threat to your repeater, sometimes you can get away with using a chomper on a snorkel or a squash on a snorkel and just finish off complete the rule, the 50% rule, by getting damage on the other zombies. So sometimes you can insta-kill the snorkel because it also serves as protection to your repeaters. Because the thing about snorkels is even though snorkels have low HP, they don't take damage from repeaters. So that's a way to think about it, is they have less HP, but because repeaters don't damage them, they kind of have a bit more HP than normal zombies in that sense. And then newspapers, you almost never need to use an insta on them because they have very low HP. The only situation might be if you get like a 2 newspaper wave on wave 11 and 12, which is like only 2 newspapers, that could be a reasonable instant kill. I think that's about it, basically. If you get a, well, obviously bobsled is kind of, you can just jumper if you get a bobsled team, like an actual bobsled team, but that shouldn't really happen if you don't make any major mistakes. Okay, so that should be basically the most important things. Again, 42 minutes, that's about the same as the other one. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. I think everything was explained, and I hope you can make use of this in your own runs. And good luck with your pulls, and see ya.